Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Matt here, finally doing another stage analysis video for you guys. It's been quite a while, so thank you for your patience, but this one is a stage that was in the hopper that I wanted to review for quite some time. And according to my notes, this was from the match we shot on May 10th, so it's been quite a while. It's from the Northern Rimfire Series match at the Battle Hill venue, which is a great venue. But just a quick refresher of how I like to structure my stage analysis videos. First, I'll give you sort of the scenario and environmental factors that I was dealing with. Then we'll go through the stage breakdown and design, what the match director had in store for us for this particular stage. I'm going to go through the actual stage footage of me shooting it with the trigger cam and everything, and hopefully give you guys some insight of what I was doing. And then lastly, after all that, I like to rate my performance in hindsight using a school grade system, A to F, just for a little bit of fun. So that's what we're going to do today. And as usual, I do have some talking points to help keep me on track. So things I'm going to touch on in this stage analysis is going to be the win brackets that I had planned. Now, win bracketing is a very in-depth topic that can be its entire own video or even video series. So I want to keep it pertaining to this particular stage today and maybe simplify it a little bit. Then I want to talk about the shot corrections and how I was trying to correct my follow-up shots, whether it's at the target at the same distance or applying what I had just learned, hitting or missing the target at another distance. And then I also want to touch on dialing versus holding, because I actually get questions about dialing versus holding fairly often, but there's really not like one correct way to do it. It's really based on the circumstances at hand, of course. And in this particular stage, I actually do both, and we'll talk about why. All right, so going on to the actual scenario and what was happening, I'll let the stage footage run without the trigger cam first while I just sort of describe what was happening that day. So this stage was halfway through the day. I believe it was close to maybe our fifth or sixth stage of the day. And leading up to this, I was shooting very well. I was only down maybe 2 or 3 points, and the wind conditions were very strong, but it was at least consistent leading up to this stage. So as soon as you figured out the wind, you could perform pretty well and not have to really chase your corrections. That was all about to change on this stage because the wind was starting to change for the worse. The magnitude of the wind speed was all over the place. It was starting to die down where people were holding, you know, just a couple tenths for wind, and it was gusting like crazy and changing directions. So leading up to this stage, I was getting a little bit nervous because I was seeing a lot of people start to struggle who were performing well leading up to this point. This was by far the worst stage I shot of this match, of this 10-stage match. I ended up getting a 7 out of 12, so I dropped 5 shots, but I really struggled, and I still ended up placing third at this match. But this stage really hurt my performance, and the 5, you'll see later, the 5 shots that I dropped on the stage were within the first 6 shots of this 12-shot stage. So really the first half of the stage was really difficult for myself. Not only that, but you can see we're shooting just from one position on this really large fallen tree, and this tree is on an elevated hill that is a couple meters higher than the general landscape and terrain. So you're even higher in, I guess, like the wind column. I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but it seems like when you're shooting from this hill, the wind effects are even more drastic. So the wind was already strong. It was starting to gust like crazy and change directions. And now we're shooting from a little bit of an elevated point. We were shooting over from the hill over the flat field onto a berm, and there was some trees on the berm, which did make the wind do some swirly stuff at the berm, not so much affecting our bullets in flight because the trees were behind the targets, but it made reading mirage on the hill really tricky because any mirage you could usually read off the top of that hill was doing some funky stuff because of the trees. And I think that might have been a little bit of a factor for some things that happened in this stage. Going on to the stage design and what the match director, in this case Adam Cool, had planned for us. First off, looking at the targets, there were two pairs of targets at different distances, so four targets in total. The first pair of targets were a gopher silhouette and a bear silhouette at 155 yards, and the other pair of targets was a small and large circle at 182 yards. There was also a mandatory mag change. So to start the stage, you would first engage the targets with double taps, so 2 rounds each, starting with the close gopher, then moving to the far small circle, back to the near bear, and then back out to the far large circle. Again, those are all double taps to start. So 2 shots each on 4 targets is 8 shots. You are then required to do the mandatory mag change, and then you would do the same target engagement sequence, but this time only doing single taps. So again, close gopher, far small circle, close bear, far large circle. An additional 4 shots plus the 8 previously, 12 shots in total with the mandatory mag change in the middle. So that was the stage design. Pretty straightforward if you kept the target sequence in mind. You just had to remember to do the mag change, of course. And I also remember I was the last shooter on the stage because I was watching everyone shoot in the now very gusty wind and starting to be a little bit concerned about what my opening wind call was going to be and how I was going to track the gusts coming up and down. So that was a little bit scary going into the stage. And the dope card I wrote up is right here. Pretty standard layout for the way I usually write my dope cards. The first row pertains to the near 155 yard targets, and the second row is the data for the far 182 yard targets. The first column is just my pure elevation solution. So from my turret being zeroed at 50 yards, I need 4.5 mils up for the near targets and 6 mils up from my zero for the far targets. The next column over is my holdovers. Anytime you see a plus symbol on my dope card, it denotes a holdover. And I also like to use the letter Z to denote the target that I'll dial to and not have to hold in my reticle for. Again, that makes this column a little bit more visually intuitive so that I can immediately see that as a holdover column when I'm reading my dope card on the stage. Some people write their holdovers in a different color and such. I'm usually too lazy to switch pens. I just like to grab one pen and write all my dope. So I had to figure out, a different way of making it intuitive that this is not my elevation solution, it is my holdovers. Going on to the third column, these are my wind brackets, which we'll touch on a little bit more in detail in a second. But going on to the bottom of my dope card, I have in big bold letters mag change because I didn't want to forget the mag change. It was something that I've been prone to forget in the past, unfortunately, and different match directors will treat missing a mag change differently. The worst case scenario, some match directors say if you've missed the mandatory mag change, it's just a stage 0, which always sucks. Other match directors will say any shots taken after a mag change, those shots won't count, but everything previous to it can count. So it kind of depends on the match director. I'm not a huge fan of mandatory mag changes in stages, but you got to play with, the rules you're given with. So I wrote it on the dope card here just to try and remember it as best as possible. Luckily in this case, I did remember to do it. So that's always a good start. All right, going on to my wind brackets here on the dope card. Wind bracketing, again, can be quite an involved topic. You can get totally in the weeds about calculating miles per hour on the plate and all that, which is helpful, but I want to sort of simplify it for this stage analysis. A wind bracket is going to be your minimum and maximum wind holds you expect to have to use in a stage. And the way you get the bracket is quite simple. You'll look at the environments leading up to the stage and see generally what the lowest consistent wind is that you'll encounter, and then see what it picks up to, because wind is never perfectly constant. So if it seems like it's always picking up for a little bit and then dying down, you want to see what the bracket of the minimum and maximum value is. So in this case, I used a 5 to 10 mile per hour wind bracket, which is a little bit larger than I usually like to use. 5 mile per hour isn't extreme, but I usually like to keep it maybe around 3 miles per hour, which usually serves me well. But because the wind was picking up and dying so frequently on the clock for people, I made it a little bit of a larger wind bracket, but keep in mind the wind was also completely dying off at times, switching directions and gusting way well above like 15 miles per hour. It's going completely nuts on this stage here and for the rest of the day in this match actually. But of course you can't plan for everything. So I decided to again bracket 5 to 10 mile per hour. And in this case, it was almost a perfectly full value wind we were dealing with, which means the wind direction is coming almost completely perpendicular to your shooting direction. And in this case, it was a left to right full value that we were dealing with. So of course you choose the wind direction in your Kestrel or in your app, you put in the minimum and maximum values, and then the wind holds it spits out is going to be your wind bracket. Again, simplified a little bit, but for the wind bracket on my 155 yard near targets, you can see here the minimum wind of 5 mile per hour that I was expecting is a 0.8 hold up to a 1.5 mil hold for 10 miles per hour. For the 182 yard far targets, my wind bracket again for the same wind values is going to be 1 mil to 1.9. So about 1 to 2 mils of wind expected on this stage, but that is expected given the general conditions. It can always be possible that the wind does something outside of the expected conditions. So you have to sort of keep that in mind. So of course we'll keep those wind values and my wind bracket in mind as we go through the stage, and I'll put it up here so we can keep referencing it, and I'll get the targets off the screen. I'm now going to play the stage footage with the trigger cam and everything, and first I will pause as needed so I can better explain the split-second decisions I was making on the clock, as well as explain anything else I need to. And then afterwards, we'll watch the stage again with no pauses so you can get a better feel for the stage pacing and general sort of experience of making these corrections and decisions in live time. So the clock's going to start. I do have a shot timer on the bottom left to help keep track of where I am in the stage, and you'll see when I get on my scope, I don't get on target immediately. I start panning around to try and read and observe the mirage. And if I go back a few seconds here, as I mentioned before, the targets were on a berm, so the 155 yard targets were sort of on the lower middle of the berm, and the 182 yard targets were further up on the berm. And between us, there is quite a wide open field. So when I start observing the mirage in my scope, you can see I find the targets, and then I pan low to try and read any mirage in the field right here. Then I look at the targets on the berm, and right now I'm looking at trying to read the mirage on the top horizon of the berm. But keep in mind, there are trees on the top of this berm to the sides where it makes reading the mirage up there a little bit difficult. But I really want to take my time here and try and figure out what the wind is doing before I even take my first shot. The reason for this, of course, is because it was really, really gusty leading up to this. And I remember asking the shooter right before me what they were doing for wind, and they said like anything from 0 to 2. So it was gusting like crazy. I wasn't sure what to do. So I wanted to take my time and observe the mirage as best I could. And I'll tell you this, I saw things moving out there, but it looked to me like it may have died slightly and maybe changed to a headwind, which it was doing at times. So I figured maybe it wasn't much wind at all that I had to hold. And of course, I'm also trying to feel the wind on my body, on my face and neck, where you have exposed skin up here. It's quite, sensitive to wind, feeling the wind on your face and stuff. So I wasn't feeling much. So that's the reason you'll see here my starting wind call is almost nothing. And when I take the shot, I'm going to pause it here. You can see I'm holding only 0.2 to center. That's it. It's much different than my prepared minimum wind value expected of 0.8 for a 5 mile per hour wind, because it really looked to me like it had died off or switched to a headwind or both. So I'm holding basically nothing. I probably should have had more faith in the stage prep that I had, because we'll see as soon as I pull this shot, it misses off right. And I looked at this a few times, and it actually, from the center of my reticle, it landed approximately 7/10 right, which is right in the ballpark of the minimum wind value I had prepared. But because I was so nervous of the wind changing, I changed sort of what I had prepared for, and it went off right. Now, in the moment, I didn't realize it was 7/10 from center. I thought it had just snuck off the right side because the puff of dirt in the moment, you have just that split second to read it, and you have to make a decision. You don't obviously have the luxury of rewinding and replaying footage over and over on the clock. So I bring it over, but not nearly enough. You can see here I'm holding about half mil. I think I pulled it at around 4/10, so I only brought it over a few tenths because I thought it just snuck off the right side. But if you see where it lands almost in the exact same spot. However, I've already moved over for wind and it's landing roughly in the same spot, which means the wind is probably picking up. So that's something that I did finally pick up on after missing my first two shots. And starting on this gopher silhouette is a mean target to start on because you have a ton of forgiveness for the elevation, of course, but your wind call has to be almost perfect to hit that gopher because it's a skinny little guy. So now I'm dialing for the far target. You can see I'm starting the stage dialing. We'll talk about that afterwards. And I'm going on to the far. Now my wind call here is a lot more significant because I know now the wind is picking up from what just happened on the gopher, and I'm more closely following my wind brackets. Now this is where I want to discuss centering your wind bracket on the plate. What I mean by that, oopsies, didn't mean to do that. What I mean by that is, again, I'm currently engaging the far target. So my wind bracket for the far target is 1 to 1.9. And if we look at the stage footage, you can see very clearly this target is about 8/10 wide, which means I can almost fit my entire wind bracket of 9/10 on that plate, and it'll cover that wind bracket. Now, given my group size at that distance, I still might sneak one off the left and right hand side, but I can almost cover the entire wind bracket. So that's what I'm doing now, because I know from the previous engagement that my wind bracket that I had planned is pretty accurate, because I saw that it was 7 to 8/10 off of the center of my reticle at the close target. So now I know it's probably somewhere in my 1 to 1.9 wind bracket on the far. So that's what I'm doing here. You can see in the footage I'm putting 1 mil right on the left side of that plate, which captures 8/10, basically almost my full 9/10 wind bracket on that plate. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'll pull the shot, and that looked like a nice centered hit. So that was a good wind call. So it ended up probably being about a 1.4 mil wind hole to the center of the plate. And of course, what you do when you hit the center of the plate, you should just do the same thing. So that's what I did here. I hold the same centering wind bracket on the plate, but now look what happens. To me, it looks like it was off left. So maybe that's because it would have been a 1.0 wind hole to center, but because of my group size at 182, maybe I just snuck it off the left side, or maybe the wind is also dying. Because again, the first impact on this target to me looked like a nice center punch. Going off the left side means the wind is probably dying a little bit, but it wasn't by much. It was just off the left edge, if anything, which means, again, I'm favoring on my wind bracket here the lower value of 1.0. So when I come back to the close target now, I have to engage the bear. I'm going to apply something on the lower end of my wind bracket. All right, on this bear now, it looks like I'm applying about a 1 mil hold to center, but something kind of weird here happens, and I've rewatched the footage a few times and I still can't quite tell what happened, so I'll just tell you what I think happened, and you can tell me if you think something differently. But keep in mind, 1 mil hold to center, favoring the lower portion of this wind bracket because I think it's dying a little bit given the miss on the far target just now. And I pull the shot at around 1 mil center. And that splash to me looked like the wind was perfect. And looking at the footage, it still looks like I had a perfect wind call because it landed right behind the bear on the berm. But to me, it looks like it went over the target. And that's what I read on the clock as well. And so my follow-up shot, I'm going to hold the same wind, but maybe favor low, which is exactly what I did. I feel like that's a rational decision to make. So you can see here, same wind call, 1 mil to center, but now I'm favoring low on the plate. It's a bear silhouette, hard to tell, but I'm basically aiming at the belly where the legs start, which I don't want to make excuses because a lot of people always claim it's that one round in the box. You hear that all the time. Maybe this one is the round in the box, like the previous one was a hot round and it went over the bear. I'm not sure, because this next one, you'll see when I pull the shot, lands perfect waterline to my reticle. But unfortunately, it's off right. And because I was holding low on the bear, a bear silhouette, it was very similar to this here, but since, you know, I was holding in the middle of the bear at first, it seemed like it went over behind, so I brought it down, and to me it looks like the shot landed just under its nose here. So if I was continuing to hold on the bear's body, I may have just nicked the nose of the bear and got an impact, but because I was favoring low on the plate, the shape of the bear led my bullet to just miss right and low. Kind of unfortunate, but that's the decision I made on the clock, and I feel like it's a decision that wasn't totally irrational. The shot was now right. So the previous miss looked like it was right behind the bear. This one looked like it was more right, which leads me to believe that the wind is now picking up. So what am I going to do when I go now to the far target looking at my wind holds? I'm now going to favor the high side. In hindsight, I should have trusted my wind brackets and my stage preparation more and just used my technique of, not my technique, but the technique of just centering the wind call on the plates, because right now what I'm doing is a little dangerous. It works sometimes, but I'm basically chasing my misses. So if I see a miss off the low side, I'm bringing my wind calls to the low. If I see it off the high side, I'm holding more wind. But in an environment like this, when the wind is changing so fast between shots and between target transitions, I feel like it would have actually been a safer method to just center my wind calls and send it, because if the wind changed, you hope that you prepared your wind bracket well enough and the plate covers enough of your wind bracket where you'll get some impacts, even if it dies down or picks up. Because right now it dies down and I correct, but then it picks up and then I correct and then it dies down. So you're chasing your tail. And if I had just centered my wind calls a little bit better, or my wind brackets on plate a little bit better, I feel like I would have had more success in this stage. So it's really frustrating when this happens. But anyway, I saw it go to the right, so I'm going to favor a higher wind call on my bracket. And you see I'm getting frustrated. I put a little quote up as I move targets. I'll get this dope card out of the way.
It's going to be one of these?
Yeah, I say it's going to be one of these, as in like one of these stages that's just super frustrating. I was getting frustrated on the clock. And what is my wind hold now? As you can see here, I'm favoring closer to 1.8 to center, which is on the high side of my wind bracket, because the previous miss was off right. So we'll, yeah, about a 1. It actually looks like a 1.9 to center, which is my max wind value. And I get those 2 hits. It was a fairly generous plate, that large one. Alright, so I did the mandatory mag change, and now I'm going to engage the targets again. Same sequence, but single taps. And you can see now I'm holding over. So now the discussion of dialing versus holding over, you can see in the same stage I'm doing both, which is something that I do actually fairly commonly, just depending on what I'm feeling in the moment. I'll often prepare, as you can see, my dope cards to have both my dialing solutions and my holdovers. And depending what's happening, I'll implement one or the other. So some factors I did take into consideration on this stage to start holding here is because every time you dial your turret, of course, you have to take your concentration and your vision away from what you're seeing in the scope image, and you have to briefly look at your turret, obviously, so you can dial your turret properly. I felt like because I was looking at my turret between targets, I was missing the effects of catching if the wind was coming up or dying down. So I started holding because I wanted to now look through my scope the entire time so I could better figure out what the heck the wind was doing, because I was getting really frustrated. So that's sort of factor number 1. It's nice not having to take your eye off your scope image if you're just in one position moving target to target in turret mode, especially in wind conditions like this where it's doing some crazy stuff. Because every time you dial your turret, you're getting back on glass and you're maybe missing some some stuff. The other thing was my holdover here was 1.5 mils, which is really easy to hold. Visually, when it's like a half mil like this, whether it's 1.5, 2.5, etc., you're just bracketing your vertical hold between the full 1 mil and 2 mil subtensions. So visually, it's really easy for me to just center it between, again, 1 and 2 mils. But this reticle I have in my Schmidt and Bender, this is the TR2 ID reticle, and it has these half mil dots as well. So it's super easy to hold half mils. The downside is if you have to apply a significant wind call in the holdover, oftentimes referred to as the Christmas tree portion of your reticle, your wind holds end a little bit short of what you might need. So you can see here in my reticle, a 1 mil holdover, the most you have for wind hold is 1 mil. Same with the 2 mil mark, and you get more wind holds in your subtensions as you go down, so it gets wider, hence the Christmas tree name. So if you dial for your turret, you're always using the main horizontal of your reticle, which you have unlimited wind holds basically. So that's a plus side of dialing for your targets, is you have all the wind subtensions to use, whereas in your Christmas tree, you might run out of wind holds in the actual subtensions. I kind of weighed the benefits and the split decision, and I wanted to hold because in 25 seconds, I can easily dial and fire off 4 shots. It wasn't because of the time management. It was more so because I wanted to concentrate on the wind, and it was easy enough for me to hold 1.5 mils. It's something that is an acquired skill. You have to practice holding over so that you become comfortable with it. It's never as intuitive or easy to do as dialing, because when you're dialing, you have a nice fine aiming point, where if you're holding over, sometimes you can sort of be in like a negative no man's land in your reticle, which is just uncomfortable. So it's just something you have to practice. Here you can see on the far target, I end up pulling the shot at about maybe a 1.4 mil hold of wind to center while holding 1.5 mils for elevation. So I am sort of in the middle of no man's land here in my reticle, but the target was big enough where I was comfortable doing that. So here we go. Again, you'll see I pull the shot, about a 1.4 mil hold while holding over, about a 0.8 to center there, but I hit the left side if you saw that. Let's back up a little bit. Reading your plate swing if you get an impact on plate is also an acquired skill, and depending on the plate and how it's hung, the hanger design, sometimes it's easier than others. This plate was really easy to read, but if you're new to this, see if you can see this plate swing to the left, meaning I hit the left side of the plate. So I pull the shot here holding a 0.8, but it hits left, which means to center, to get a center punch, I probably only had to hold maybe a 0.5 or a 0.6. And here again, I'm holding over 1.5 mils. I don't want to let the wind pick up and blow it off the right side though, so I'm still holding about a 1.5 to center. More like 1.4, and hits the left side again, but it's a big enough plate I was comfortable doing that. You can see my expression after the stage was a little bit of dissatisfaction because I was really chasing my tail at the beginning. As I mentioned before, I think a better way of approaching this would be to trust my wind brackets off the get-go, and because the wind was changing up and down so fast, I wasn't able to track the wind between shots and make a proper correction. I should have just trusted my wind calls and centered them up on stage. I think that's the biggest takeaway from me here, is sometimes the wind conditions are so gusty where you can't really chase your corrections like I was trying to do. Let's go ahead and watch the entire stage without pausing now, and you can get a better feel for the pacing and having to make these decisions in, the split second. So again, get on glass here, trying to read the mirage at the bottom of the hill at the target location, and then up at the top. Don't see much. Maybe it died and became a headwind, so I start with way too little of a wind call. Should have trusted my wind bracket. Didn't correct enough, so both those went off right. But now I'm going to, what I should have done the entire time is center my wind bracket onto this plate, and I get, the first hit is good, but the next one sneaks off the left side. At least that's what it looks like to me. So I now favor the low side. This looked like a pretty good win call, but maybe over the target. So now I hold low on the target, and it sneaks just under the chin of the bear, it looks like. And then this plate's generous enough, but I'm still trying to read the plate to see what's going on down there. Vanquish mag change on the CZ, still awesome. And then holding over, as explained before. Left side of the plate, and then a generous enough target for the last shot here. And you can see my reaction is a little bit bummed. But that's the stage. It was something that kind of hurt mentally. I remember I had to take a walk after and sort of try and lock back in and get back in the game. As I mentioned before, I still performed well for the rest of the day, but this was a stage that I learned a lot on. I still think a better method, instead of chasing the wind corrections like I was doing, which sometimes works, it's something that I find myself doing and having success with sometimes. But when the wind is like this and gusting like crazy, sometimes you got to prepare a good solid wind bracket and just trust that wind bracket. Again, the preparation of the wind bracket is just as important, obviously, because you need the right bracket for the conditions. But I think it would have been a better solution for this particular stage. So all that said, I'm going to now grade myself, and I'm going to give myself a B-, which might be a little bit generous. It might be a C+. Some people might give me a D, but I'm feeling nice today. B- because I feel like my preparations was good, and I really like the fact that I did take my time at the beginning to try and observe the mirage before even pulling my first shot. It's really tempting to try and rush through a stage, but taking your time to try and observe is the right thing to do at times. And I have full confidence that with the speed at which I can shoot and dial and do all this stuff, I wasn't going to get too sloppy, and I still had plenty of time to get through my shots. So that's why I gave myself a B-, but maybe a little bit generous in this case. Anyway, hopefully you got some good information out of this stage analysis. I actually have another one already planned in the hopper. It's going to be the very next stage after this one. So we'll see how that works out for me from the same match. So you can look forward to that. But as usual, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. If not, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Cheers.